we're looking for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Motion and support. Any changes or corrections? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the same. Motion carried. Public comments. Public, you have 3 minutes to address the board. Step up and give us your name, please. Appears to be no public comments. Moving on to the minutes of the January 7th meeting, looking for approval.
Make a move, we approve the amendments as presented.
We have Phil making a move and Tony supporting. Any changes or corrections? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the same. Motion carried. Next up is the Sheriff or Under Sheriff Chris Cool for purchase of patrol cars. Chris, good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Before you, I have a requested motion to move forward with the purchase of 5 Dodge Charger patrol vehicles and 1 Ford Escape vehicle used exclusively for the Detective Bureau. The total of that purchase, which is budgeted in the 2019 capital improvement plan, is $148,194. These vehicles are purchased on the State of Michigan My Deal as required by policy. And LaFontaine Dodge in Lansing holds the bid for Dodge products, and Signature Ford in Owasso holds the bid for Ford products. Obviously, we rack up quite a few miles on our vehicles every year. Typically, we rotate them through a number of assignments. I know we have some new commissioners here, and essentially what we do is we have our frontline patrol force. Those are the people out patrolling, general patrol in the county every day, 24 hours a day. Those vehicles obviously run typically 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We sometimes try to schedule breaks in there so a car's not being ran constantly. Once they get up into around 80, 90, 100,000, we move them into less intensive assignments, like over into the school liaison program where maybe the deputy's just driving to the school and most of his or her work is actually in the school, or even some of the township assignments that have a less intensive patrol as far as miles actually driven within those assignments. And then once they have fulfilled their life within those assignments, they usually have north of 100,000, sometimes 120, 130, and then we kind of schedule to rotate them out of service. We try to keep a schedule or a rotation plan of vehicles going through every year. This year, I have attached the actual bids in board docs so you can see exactly what options we're buying, exactly what vehicles we're buying. We had a bit of a miscommunication in the past years, and I want to make sure everyone is crystal clear. Also within the agenda item, you can see that the vehicles that are coming out of service, their current mileage, but keep in mind we will order these vehicles. We will not receive the vehicles until probably May or June, sometimes maybe a little bit earlier, and they'll take another month or two to upfit, so realistically we won't see our new vehicles in service for till about probably midsummer, so we anticipate the mileage, which is why I included the projected mileage in here, of those vehicles going out of service. As far as the Ford Escape for the detectives, as I stated in the agenda item, this is exclusively for the Detective Bureau. We suffered a loss of one of our unmarked detective vehicles in June of 2018 where it was hit by a motorist. We were not at fault. The vehicle was declared a total loss and totaled out by the insurance carrier. In the meantime, the detectives have been using a repurposed Dodge Charger. And this vehicle, as far as the Ford Escape, was the selection or request of the detectives in the Detective Bureau. I think they're tired of driving dark-colored Tauruses and Chargers around since they all look the same. There's another agency that used this that recommended it, so that was the request that I have placed through for this. And again, I included the bid from Signature Ford, listing the exact vehicle that we would get, the SE four-wheel drive with the upgraded 2-liter engine option for $1,335, bringing the total purchase price on that Ford Escape to $22,864.
Chris, just 2 questions for me. I think it's pretty clear in the document, but just to state it. So the 5 are for actual patrol and 1 is for the DB, correct?
That is correct. 5 will be fully marked, outfitted patrol vehicles, and the Ford Escape will be a unmarked vehicle exclusively for the detectives, actually the detective sergeant to be exact.
And then are you moving away from the Ford Explorers or expense of it? Probably, I'm guessing.
I see that you saw the price increase this year as well. So we actually have a fairly reasonable fleet of Explorers. The price of the Chargers did not change, and thus far with this winter, we've not had any issue, especially with the all-wheel drives. So financially, it was a better option for us. We may look to maybe get one or two more of those in the coming years, but I don't see us outfitting a whole fleet of them only because the expense continues to rise versus the Charger price has stayed the same.
Okay, Commissioners, any other questions? Phil?
The 2.0 engine and the Escape, is that enough engine for what you do?
Well, it is the EcoBoost engine, and keep in mind that this is a detective vehicle, so it won't be frontline use. They recommended, based on research in the other agencies, that they get the upgraded engine option from the 1.5 liter. We don't do a lot of surveillance, but when that time does come where we need to do that, they need a little bit more engine. The other agencies that had used it were fairly satisfied with the engine and its performance, so I do think for that kind of assignment, it will be satisfactory for the detectives.
They'll never, unlikely they're being pursued or anything?
That's correct. We don't permit our unmarked vehicles to be in pursuit or anything like that. Surveillance would be the only relatively, I wouldn't call it high speed, but relatively demanding operation, and we don't do a ton of that. Those times do come when we do it, but I think that'll be enough engine option for them.
It's only 120 some cubic inch.
You know, that I don't know.
Yeah, wow, okay. Maybe it's not a time to pinch pennies when you come to your vehicles, but if it's proven, the Explorer is proven, and it seems like a little bitty engine. But, all right, thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the Commissioners?
I just have a couple of questions. So I see you're coming with asking for 5 vehicles total, is that right?
So I'm asking for 5 Dodge Chargers and then a 6th vehicle, which is the Ford Escape, so 6 vehicles total.
Okay, so how many vehicles do you currently have right now?
So we have a fleet of 34, I believe, and then we have one vehicle assigned to the SWAT team, which is actually a lone armored vehicle from Michigan State Police. So a total of 35 vehicles in our fleet. And then obviously a number of those are assigned in various places, whether it be township assignments where we have contracts for law enforcement in those townships, and within those contracts, we build costs in for vehicles. Let's say you have a 40-hour-a-week contract, we might build the cost into that township for a vehicle every 3 or 4 years, depending on what the demand is. So those costs in our township contracts are calculated in regards to vehicles.
Okay. And how often do you work your way through these vehicles up to this high mileage until you're no longer using it? How long does it take, I guess, to go through a car, I guess is what I'm asking?
So depending on the use and the assignment, obviously you can see that some of these vehicles that are going out of service are as old as a 2014 and as new as a 2016. So generally, we look anywhere in the realm of about 3 to 4 years that we get our vehicle life out of that. And then they do get auctioned by the facilities department, and that money goes back to the general fund. Usually each vehicle might fetch a few $1,000s, really depending on the condition. So, we've had some vehicles that have had a very good life of, 5 or 6 years just because of the assignment that they were in. It didn't calculate a lot of mileage, but we are rotating vehicles every year, rotating them out of frontline patrol into those lower impact assignments that I talked about. So it's a constant kind of moving system, and we try to update the vehicle log and roster to keep them moving and keep the frontline patrol vehicles, the ones that are running every day, all day, potentially in high-speed pursuit situations, as the lower miles vehicles.
Now I understand the excuse me. I understand the wear and tear on these vehicles are probably a whole lot more than what I would put on my vehicle. So just to play the advocate here, generally if you just kind of make sure that we have good follow-up with cars, tire rotations and oil changes, those types of things, it seems like cars would last a little bit longer. Do we have a process in making sure that those things get done on time?
Absolutely. About 1.5 years ago, the Sheriff's Department had its own fleet mechanic. We were kind of one of the last people to have a dedicated mechanic just because of our fleet. As he retired, we had kind of worked with county administration and we eliminated that position, and we now contract with the Department of Transportation to do all of our vehicle service and maintenance. They keep very detailed logs. That was kind of one of the things that we were lacking. We had some basic records that our mechanic kept, but he was one guy trying to maintain a fleet of 30-plus cars. So we keep a very detailed log as far as the service done. We do expend quite a bit of money on the maintenance and service of these vehicles, especially when it comes to things like you said, tires, brakes, and oil changes. Those are really our most common maintenance. So we do have a good practice for that. So when they do go out of service, they are, unless they've suffered some kind of catastrophic situation. They are in decent condition, just by most rules and regulations not necessarily suited for frontline patrol. We don't necessarily want our deputies conducting high-speed operations or pursuit driving with a vehicle in excess of 100,000 miles. It's just not safe. You can refurbish all the things you want, but then you get to a point where you're replacing suspension, drivetrain components, very expensive items where it's kind of outlived the life of the vehicle. Considering the price that the My Deal that we purchased them for, obviously much less than a retail price. So yes, we do keep up on maintenance. These vehicles are well maintained, but these vehicles that are going out of service have reached the end of their useful life, where the cost to maintain them is now starting to grow greater than the cost of just replacing the vehicle.
Okay. I don't know. I certainly understand the need to want to have the best so that you can perform your best in doing that. But I guess, and this is, again, I understand that the wear and tear on these vehicles are a whole lot more than what I would ever put on any vehicle that I would drive. But I just always kind of had the rule of thumb, once a car kind of hits 100,000 miles, it's just getting kind of broke in. Now I understand that you're going at high rates of speed and those types of things. So I understand that. It just seems a little excessive to me to go through these amount of cars in, 5-6 years? Every 5 or 6 years? Is that common practice?
Absolutely. And these are these deputies' offices. They spend all day in these vehicles, and they spend all day patrolling. If we don't have an adequate fleet and a fleet that is fit to go out there and patrol every day, vehicles that are sitting in the maintenance bay or waiting for repair parts or things like that, we can't conduct law enforcement operations.
Sure.
In the scheme of the county's $45 million plus general fund operation, $148,000 for vehicles for frontline patrol staff. Why that's not insignificant, I understand the cost of that. The reality is that cost in the general scheme of operations is relatively small. One of the leading cause of officer deaths is vehicle accidents, and you can attribute that to a number of factors, but I certainly don't want to see our people involved in a situation where we have a hodgepodge fleet of vehicles that aren't suitable for patrol and aren't suitable up to the job of patrol, especially considering the fact that we receive a number of revenues from township assignments that offset the cost of these vehicles.
Okay, thank you. One last question.
Okay.
I guess this is just a question to the chair. I guess the next course of action, I'm the new guy, so I'm still getting caught up a bit. This goes on to full board, is that correct?
It does. If there's a motion in support and enough votes, it goes to the full board for action because of the total dollar amount involved.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Tony? Okay, let's get a second for the motion first. Okay, motion and second. And Chairman Shotwell, you had a comment first?
I wanted to share with new commissioners the fact that we spent literally 8 years trying to figure out the best way to buy law enforcement vehicles. And as with the road department, if we overlap or don't buy 1 year, all of a sudden we're looking at 9 to 12 vehicles that are in bad shape, and we're having to replace a large fleet with a large purchase, whereas by working through these vehicles the way Under Sheriff Cool is recommending, we've found the practice to work much better. We have much safer vehicles, we have much safer officers involved in situations, and we also have a safer public, because the state-of-the-art vehicles help us protect the law-abiding citizens of Jackson County very, very well, and the financial analysis in the end, because of the maintenance costs and everything else on a vehicle that doesn't get turned off, sets and idles when an officer's not in the vehicle, or then has to immediately be used in a pursuit situation. It was found again to be much more fiduciarily responsible for the Board of Commissioners to set this buying plan up where we rotate the vehicles in and out. I think if you get with facilities, you'll find that the maintenance program on these is very responsible and very thorough, and our vehicles take quite a beating driving around and where they're involved in different things. And the need for these vehicles to be purchased at this plan that we've put together about 12 years ago now, was it, Chris?
That is correct, sir.
We found that our officers are safer, the public is safer, And we've reduced the overall cost to the fleet to the point that we don't have to have our own mechanic working on these vehicles dedicated specifically to them, because we're able to rotate them through the system correctly. And I appreciate the work that's put in by our facilities department and the undersheriff on analysis of these vehicles and how they choose which vehicles to rotate in and out.
I wanted to give a couple of comments too. Chris, I appreciate the document that lists what the vehicles are you're taking out of service and what the miles on them are. And as I think Mike or Steve mentioned, the hours on them, they all have hour meters now, and they've all got upwards of 7,000 or 8,000 hours. If you think about it, it's 5 days a week, 8 hours a day is 2,080 hours a year. So they have essentially 4 years worth of full-time work on them just in idling. And the service that they get, I'm happy that we're in a position to be able to pull them out of service after 100,000 miles versus having to drive them. So I do appreciate the document, and again, knowing now where each of the vehicles is going is a help for me, and it makes it a no-brainer for me. Phil, did you have one more point?
Just a question, maybe off in the weeds here a little bit, but I would like to understand your operation a little bit better. Do you assign a specific vehicle to an officer, and that's his vehicle to use every shift, or do they just rotate and jump in whatever's available?
So, yes and no. So we do generally assign vehicles. Police officers are kind of territorial. They typically are assigned their vehicle by the sergeant. It is typically that vehicle for the entire shift change or the shift pick that they're working in. Of course, the deputies in the township assignments, they have an assigned vehicle. The school liaison officers have an assigned vehicle. But you may have an occasion where either we have a newer deputy or maybe the deputy on the preceding shift that's using the vehicle is held over, so they have to use a different car. Generally, yes, that's their vehicle. They're responsible for the care and the maintenance of it. They know based on the service indicators in the car that when it's time to go get the service with JCDOT, they are in charge of arranging that. We have a sergeant that oversees the vehicle program that makes sure that we don't have an employee who is just disregarding that, which that can happen, and he will pull the mileage every about 7 days or 10 days to ensure that the fleet is meeting the requirements as far as the service due. A lot of times JCDOT is very preemptive now. They will look at things when they come in and say, you know what, I think this vehicle is going to need brakes or rotors or suspensions or struts or whatever in about 5,000 more miles. Should we do that right now while it's down? And we'll make that decision. So they've been very much a godsend in the sense of they have a lot of eyes on the vehicles. We are now well into that program where the mechanics have a good history as far as the vehicles coming in and out. They see it. They understand, hey, this was here last time, and it didn't have, whatever, this damage or this warped road or whatever. So there is good eyes on the vehicle. Now we have a core group of people doing the maintenance, and they're very preemptive, giving us kind of a look down the road as far as what may need to be replaced.
Yeah, I like the one guy per vehicle approach, because I use that to my place, and it a little bit of ownership and take pride.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it makes it more accountable, at my level at least.
Agreed.
Thank you, that's all I just wondered. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a support to send to the full board for approval. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the same. Motion carried. Sheriff 2018 year in review for the Sheriff's Office. Chris.
Uh-oh, you guys got a new computer. Where am I going to find the E-drive on this here, IT?
Yeah, I got it.
So if anybody has any questions on these slides, just feel free to interject, and I'll answer them as best I can. So here's some basic statistics about the jail. Our daily population is about Just under 368. Our intake, we intaked over 7,300 inmates last year. Now, some of this is just people coming over from the court to be fingerprinted and mugshot and then released, but we still have to intake them for the court. We obviously had nearly 250,000 meals served. 26 inmates have participated in the Jackson Public Schools High School completion. This is an actual diploma from Jackson High School, not a GED class. They have to meet certain requirements coming into the program. So they have to have a certain baseline of education. There are a couple people that were borderline that we were able to get caught up, and they attend classes every day just like any other students with a dedicated instructor that is in our facility from Jackson Public Schools. And then, of course, nearly 1,000 people were arraigned via video arraignment. There's some facts about our medical services. You can see them for themselves right there. The CMH visits, those have really been up this year, and that's in a good way. Now that we have Shirley from Lifeways, who came to us in roughly August or September, she has been a huge asset for the organization. She has spent a lot of time speaking with the inmates who may be in a mental health crisis, providing them coping skills. She's done a lot of amazing things. We had an inmate who was in a single-man cell just because he was not able to cope with being in a tank with other inmates. She worked with him over a period of many weeks, gave him a bunch of coping skills and processes to try to handle that. He's been able to kind of mainline into the rest of the population. So she does a lot of good work there, and I can't thank her enough in the contract with Lifeways. As a matter of fact, the CMH visits have been so high that we're in conversations with the director of Lifeways to perhaps get a second worker at the Channer Road facility, so we have one at both jails, and they can adequately deal with all the requests coming in. So here are some of the major initiatives that we have done. The CMH contract with Lifeways we already talked about. We do have a new program that we started at the end of the last year that Centers for Family Health is really kind of involved in, and this is Vivitrol. Vivitrol is basically a long suspension type of medication that does not allow you to get high off opiates. This is a voluntary program. The drug is being provided to us free from the manufacturer, and if we have an individual who wants to voluntarily involve themselves in this program, as they're getting close to release, we will give them this Vivitrol injection, the medical staff will, and then they follow up and get their repeated injections at the Centers for Family Health. This allows them to not succumb to the opiate addictions, and hopefully we'll put them on a path to recovery. We're not going to ding them if they get into the program and then 6 months later they come back for some type of opiate-related crime. We know that opiate recovery takes many, many times, so we are going to allow them into this program as long as they are willing to do that. We have a number of upgrades at the facility, both with the camera and the camera operation system and the main security. And then last year, obviously, we had the attempted escape from the inmates who had stolen the food service vehicle. We instituted a number of processes and procedures inside, but also placed the what you might call jersey barriers or bollards down to create a serpentine type of situation inside and outside the facility. So any vehicles attempting to enter or leave the facility forcibly are not able to get up to speed and navigate that serpentine type of situation. We continue to try to recover some of the fees from the inmates, both from medical co-pays and incarceration fees. In kind of a realistic format, what we recover is actually very little. Some people just do not have the ability to pay, and we understand that. Video visitation is up and running. We've had some snags with that. We did get the video visitation booths at Wesley Street up that Commissioner Mahoney had kind of suggested and recommended. That has seen limited use, but we are seeing a number of visit booths being utilized down there, and we kind of have the process streamlined out now. We've helped a number of people come in, figure out the video visitation process. They're able to spend longer on the visits, and they can visit in many more hour-of-day options than they could when we were actually doing face-to-face visits through the glass. Seems to be a good reception to that. We've had to help a number of people through. If we have some older people that just can't seem to figure out the process, we will arrange for them a face-to-face visit through the glass. But thus far, we've had very limited need for that, and we have our staff working with the people when they come in if they can't understand it, just trying to kind of get through what the process is.
Chris, can I interject a question?
Absolutely.
On the video visitation on site, there's no cost to anybody for that, correct?
That is correct. So they come to our facility, they can visit for free, and they can visit for a longer period of time, and they can come really any hour of the day outside of the hours for meals and the lights out time. So it used to be a very defined hour in the middle of the week, basically 12:30 to 2:30. Obviously, a lot of people are at work. We didn't have visits on the weekend because of staffing. They can come visit on the weekend now. And if they want to pay to visit from the comfort of their own home via a computer, they can do that. We have the ultimate override on those visits should they become to the point where they are doing things or saying things on there that are not acceptable in our facility. We've had to shut a couple of those visits down, but we do monitor those just sporadically. We don't sit there and watch them, but we will just random sample a number of video visits that were done. Since those are all recorded, we don't watch them in live time, and then if there's things that are going on those, we will basically prevent that inmate from doing that.
And then, Chris, can you expound too on the tablet program, which I think you're getting to next, on what they have access to?
Absolutely. So this is a program that's on a very test basis. Obviously, you can't be a security risk in the facility. Really, the point of this is the inmates through the commissary can buy any number of periodicals, magazines, papers, crossword puzzles, you can name it. Basically, this is a digitization of that to kind of help clean up the kind of messiness of the facility. They're not our tablets. They belong to the phone provider. If they're damaged, that's on the phone provider's responsibility, not on ours. Frankly, I'm skeptical that this is going to have great success. So they can buy various digital periodical content that's limited by the company, and then there is some ability to do some programming on those tablets should that person fall within that. Whether it be self-help type of programs or surveys, or whether it be items to help them through coping mechanisms, things like that. So it's on a very limited basis. We're just going to select a number of people to try it that are not security risk or low risk inmates, probably frankly at Shannon Road. We've looked at the actual physical piece of hardware. It's not a risk to the staff or to the inmate themselves. So we'll kind of watch this as it grows and see if there's any real value or long-term need for this.
So it's not unlimited access to the internet, and it's not emailing?
That is correct. There are only certain things they have access to, content they have to pay for, just like they would through the commissary, and it's a very strict, regulated pool of things that they can buy. Before I move on to the patrol real quick, I also want to talk about, which is not in there, for some of you that may know, we instituted 12-hour shifts in corrections about mid-year last year, and this was actually at the request of the Corrections Deputies Union, not our request. And thus far, for our 2018 fiscal year versus our 2017 fiscal year, we've reduced the overtime spend in that division by about $100,000, directly resulting from not only the video visitation and the fact that it frees up officers to do the job that they're supposed to do in the facility, where we're not ushering inmates to and from their visit booths all day long, but it's also reduced the needed overtime because of the 12-hour shift. So hopefully that will continue to have a positive impact on the county's general fund budget as we continue forward. In our patrol division, we were dispatched to about 27,000 incidents. Not all of these are police reports. These are incidents that we may go and find we just need to resolve something. Purchase permits for firearms, those are still on the upward trend, 5,600. They have kind of leveled off a little bit, but they are still growing in just a small fashion. And then nearly 2,300 FOIA requests that came through our front office, and these are people wanting either body cam video, vehicle videos, police reports, or some general information from us. And those are all processed through front office. That is not including the FOIAs that Joni receives through HR that are transmitted to us. 1,800, a little over 1,800 arrests, about 10,000 traffic stops, 162 OWIs, 2,200 citations, and we have seized 11 firearms this year, and these are illicit firearms. I'm not talking about the CPL holder whose certificate expired or something of that nature. These are felonious individuals carrying firearms that are in no way licensed or permitted to. That is significant. Some kind of major events here. In November, we conducted active shooter training with the courthouse. This was a live training. They closed the courthouse. This was something that the courthouse needed to do to comply with their security audit that they had coming up at the beginning of this year, and something that the employees desired very much. So we outlined a process much like we do for the schools, but in this situation we had the employees in their work site on their floors, considering the fact that you have many assistant prosecutors who might be in a courtroom conducting business, not actually in the prosecutor's office. So we did floor by floor. We did a number of scenarios on each floor. We fired live rounds that are blank. That were blank rounds from a rifle, so they could hear what that sounded like. We also wanted them to understand the smell of what gunpowder smells like, and we wanted them to conduct a plan how they would get out of their area, or if they were confronted by the assailant, what they would do as far as fighting. We had a deputy in what we call a red man suit, a padded suit, who was the assailant. They were allowed to attack him, hit him with chairs, staplers, shove them, etc. So it was kind of a live exercise that we did. We did a lot of lead up to this as far as what to expect. It was very well received. That was the largest training we have done. I think we had about 160, 180 employees. Northwest School was the biggest one that we had conducted, and that was a little over 100 people. So this was by far our largest one. Some of the major incidents, we had the accidental shooting on Christmas Day in Concord Township, where the victim was struck by a relative who was demonstrating some firearms activities. That victim did survive and was taken to Henry Ford. We had, of course, a very well-publicized road rage incident up in Rives Township. That case was actually just recently adjudicated, and the individual was convicted on a number of felonies. In March, we had the unexpected snowstorm on I-94, which basically brought westbound I-94 to a parking lot. We received a great amount of help from Blackman Township and from the state police. This was actually a good, soft deployment of our continuity plan, where we had to get a number of people off the highway in these kind of very cold, treacherous conditions. Their vehicles were not drivable, and we kind of created a reunification point. The Department on Aging was kind enough to provide meals. JTA transported them from the scene, and we reunified them at the health department with their families and friends. It was actually a very good kind of live exercise to see how these things would work in the real world, and I'm pleased to say no one was actually seriously injured in that. Just was a lot of damage. We discovered a small vehicle theft operation on Sargent Road back in August, and that was a follow-up from a stolen vehicle that was taken in the southern portion of this county. Those individuals were ultimately charged by the prosecuting attorney's office, and a number of vehicles were stolen that were recovered and gotten back to their owners. And then on December, on Horton Road in Summit Township, we had a burglary in progress where the homeowner had a basically live camera system he was able to view from his phone, and he checked in his house and saw an individual in his house and called 911. The suspect fled as deputies were arriving, but we were able to locate the suspect with the assistance of the Michigan State Police and Spring Arbor Township. He had ran on foot several ways west of the address into another area. We were able to successfully find him and charge that individual. And again, we had the very well-publicized Western Career Prep incident where the student came to the building armed with a handgun. He had a dispute with another female student there. He was eventually charged and convicted of those crimes with the good work at the prosecuting attorney's office. A domestic situation in March in Summit Township where a female suspect had stabbed her boyfriend. She was charged with attempted murder. And in March of 2018, we had the shooting of the individual who conducted the armed robbery at the Walgreens in Blackman Township. Ourselves, along with Jackson Police and Blackman Public Safety, were involved in that. That was investigated by the Michigan State Police, and the prosecuting attorney's office had ruled that that shooting was justified. And then, of course, we had another shooting that we were not involved in on Easter Sunday with the city police, who had responded to a domestic dispute on Shiddock Ave. At the request of the city police, we responded to handle that crime scene in assistance with the Michigan State Police. And the traffic team has investigated 5 fatal crashes this year in Jackson County. We had the 2 drownings that were several minutes apart in Vandercook and Wolf Lake on the 4th of July weekend. The dive team was called in. Both individuals were recovered. Unfortunately, they had both succumbed to their injuries. And as far as Marine Patrol goes, almost 270 hours of patrol. The divers completed about 101 dives in both the call-outs and trainings, and we had conducted 6 boater safety classes. We were able to get about 110 young local boaters trained on marine safety and get their boating safety certificate. Again, Marine Patrol is not a very enforcement-intensive assignment. We received a grant from the DNR. Obviously, boating is much more about recreation in this county, and we like to see that. Obviously, we don't have any tolerance for drunk boating or reckless boating, things like that, but rarely do we encounter those kind of situations. It's more of an instructional aid. So when we do the vessel inspections, we do not issue a lot of infractions. We will issue warnings for boaters who don't have the appropriate personal flotation devices, who are maybe operating against marine laws, or may have some other vessel error or something that they need to correct, but it's really not an enforcement-heavy operation, so we're glad to kind of train those people and help them understand the boating laws. Some basic facts from JNet. We have 2 deputies assigned to JNet. The city police has 1 detective, and the Michigan State Police have 3 individuals assigned to this unit. And here's some basic facts about what they've seized in their investigations this year. Obviously, you can see that our heroin seizures per gram are going down, which is a good thing. But the very unfortunate part of that is methamphetamines are making a very aggressive comeback. I assume that would be to the displacement of the heroin distributors and the fact that things have grown much more intensive on that. But this year we've seen a large resurgence of methamphetamines to the point where we've made many seizures that were in excess of a kilo, which is not something I've ever seen in my entire career. Speaking to that effect, we had obviously the JNet investigation, which large-scale meth dealer, he attempted to throw the methamphetamines out the window in the parking lot of Jackson High. He was subsequently arrested, and there's a number of other investigations that have kind of spurned off of that. And then again, another large-scale long-term investigation into a meth dealer who stopped coming back from the Metro Detroit area and was arrested with a large amount of methamphetamine. So, something new this year at the request of the City of Jackson Police, we have supplied manpower on a task force that was requested by Chief Hitt to reduce the incidence of violence and shootings in the city of Jackson. Ourselves and the Michigan State Police and Blackman-Leoni Public Safety all have members assigned to this team. They work out of the City Police Department and are under the supervision of the City Police. And this task force has had a very noticeable result. In speaking with Chief Hitt, the shots fired complaints in the last about 45 days or 50 days are drastically down compared to where we were for about the first quarter or first half of the year. That task force alone has seized 4 guns, 48 arrests, and made over 200 stops on targets that we believed are involved in gang violence. Some of our volunteers, we have both mounted deputies that assist us very heavily in the fair and events like the fireworks and things like that. And then we have reserve deputies who also conduct patrols with our deputies. They're kind of a second set of eyes and ears in the car. The mounted patrol has put in over 1,600 hours, and reserves alone nearly another 1,600 hours. And then we have some volunteers at the front window who do a number of clerical and administrative assignments, logging all the gun permits that we receive and entering them into the Michigan State Police database. OEM has hosted a number of exercises and a number of active shooter trainings presented to a number of businesses. Obviously, a number of schools. We do that at least once every 2 years at the school's request. Sometimes they get new staff in and they need to go through that. So we try to get those schools on a rotation where we're doing that frequently before the school year starts or at the end of the school year. Just some of the basic things you probably heard about. Severe Preparedness Week in April, that's going to be coming up again. A number of tabletop exercises specifically focused around long-term care and in conjunction with Henry Ford Health should we have some type of impact, whether it be weather or electrical outages that would affect long-term care facilities. And OEM had helped the fair officials create a new response plan. The response plan they had was very outdated and was very lacking, so we worked aggressively with them to get that into place before last year's fair, which they successfully did. Critical infrastructure, again, that's one of our primary things, working with Consumers Energy, identifying new critical infrastructure sites about restoration. We obviously conducted a review of the accident I just talked about, and we are always participating with Hillsdale and Lenawee in our Tri-County area to look at resources that we could share, especially in a large geographically wide event. So we kind of came up with the idea of a Tri-County damage assessment team, which would speed that process, which would then flow the federal resources in here much faster. Again, we looked at some of the review plans, the emergency plans that were submitted to the state for part of this funding. That was recently the State Police Competitive School Safety Grant. We looked at their applications and helped them with all of these schools in here, and we're happy to announce that obviously 11 schools received portions of that grant. I think that was a direct result of our interaction with them and looking at their applications and adding things or taking things away from that that may be beneficial to them. Again, just some of the work that OEM does. We conducted a exercise with DTMB and the help of the 911 department for a exercise at the State of Michigan office building down here and identified some problems for them. And then Code Red, which is the product that we use for mass notification, we sent out 37 notifications this year. And those were things for missing children, endangered adults, lockdowns, obviously significant crashes for lengthy closures, and of course, weather warnings. These are some of the courses that we have hosted, and so you'll probably see those emails come out through the course of your year here. If there's anything that looks interesting to you, please get with us. We'll be happy to get you to those classes. This is some of the required FEMA training that local officials will need in the event that we have a disaster. The $74,139, that was for fiscal year 2016. This is the Homeland Security Grant. These are grants that are used for the application of items that local law enforcement, hospitals, long-term care facilities, fire departments may need for equipment. This is not money that comes back to the county. The EMPG grant, the $37,144, that is the money that comes directly to the County of Jackson as revenue, and that is for the cost of running the OEM department. Obviously, it's not significant, but it's better than nothing. And that is the revenue that goes back to the county, along with the $1,000 for a hazardous materials emergency planning grant that we do every year. Those two funds are monies that go directly back to the county as revenue for our cost in conducting this office. We talked about Code Red, and a number of things that were completed with the Homeland Security grant funds. Urban Search and Rescue Team shoring equipment. This is for the regional search and rescue team made up of fire departments. SRT ballistic shields. We had some upgrades to the Jackson County EOC. For those of you who don't know, the EOC used to be in the basement of the courthouse many years ago. As the clerk's office was renovated, the clerk moved down there. The EOC has been kind of without a home. The meeting room or the presentation room up at Shannon Road was slated for the EOC. We have finally successfully rolled that out, and we have all the equipment there functioning thanks to a great help of IT. Some more of the products that were purchased, obviously the law enforcement mask for Jackson County law enforcement that this board approved so kindly back at the beginning of 2018, and then some other fire equipment that fire departments needed, and heavy vests, the Jackson County Law Enforcement Complex Coordinated Vests. These are heavy vests that go over their exterior should you encounter an active shooter with a rifle. Henry Ford received some trauma training, Blackman Township a mobile fingerprint scanner, and then the fire departments received some task force equipment. My favorite. So the 800 megahertz radio system, real quick because I feel like I've already overstayed my welcome here. Back in 2016, the voters approved an increase in the surcharge to the 911 surcharge. We increased that and had several things that we were going to address. One of them was the public safety communication system. As 2016 moved on, a group called the Radio Ad Hoc Committee, made up of a number of individuals, had decided that the investment in our current system outweighed perhaps what we were going to see as far as delivery out of that. So we made the decision to move on to the state's Michigan Public Safety Communication System, an 800 megahertz digital communication system, state-of-the-art, being used in many places across the state of Michigan. And that project commenced in about August or September of 2016. I was asked to manage that project. So this required the building of 3 new tower sites. There's 2 tower sites currently in Jackson County that we could utilize to make a 5-site simulcast ring. If you can think about Jackson County as a square, think of a ring around the county of towers, flooding signal into the center of the county. We've given a number of updates. I know we have some new commissioners here, but basically all of the infrastructure is done. We've applied for all the permits for the townships. We've got all the variances needed and all that kind of stuff. The actual physical structures are up. The radio equipment is on. The sheds that hold all the equipment are energized. The antennas, the microwave dishes, all that stuff is on. The dispatch center, the consoles have been finished and installed, although they're in a temporary state right now. A number of things at the back end of the 911 department that I'm sure Director Hammond will talk about more in depth. That is up and running. So essentially we have the system running. What we are doing right now is we are kind of doing the last major milestone, although there's a bunch of back-end stuff to do as far as paperwork and testing and things like that. We are actually out, starting last Wednesday, driving the system, and we are going to all these spots within the county, and we are physically testing the system like we would use it. We have 3 cars loaded up with a number of computers and sensors and antennas. Those computers will gather the signal data from that exact spot, and we will either pass or fail that grid or tile. This is Jackson County. Each one of these squares on here is what we are doing. They are each one of these squares are numbered. We have to go to each one of these squares, and basically there's a geofence around it, and our computer lets us know when we've wandered into that square or tile. We make a physical test call back to the dispatch center. They grade our voice clarity in, we grade their voice clarity coming back, and we notate it on all 3 systems that measure the 3 different decibel levels as to whether it passed or failed that test. I'm happy to announce we started on Wednesday. We're probably done with 2/3 of the county. This is obviously a very time-intensive, labor-intensive task, and thus far we have no failed tiles or failed grids, even down into portions of Washtenaw County, down off of Lamb Road, up into sections of Washtenaw County up off of M52. And so we are traveling outside the county to make sure the signal path travels adequately. I am happy to announce the performance of the system is basically just as Motorola guaranteed and as we expected, but this is the point where we have to go through and verify that this $7.5 million we spent actually talks and functions and moves like they said it would. So once this milestone gets done, which we anticipate having done on Tuesday or Wednesday, there are some smaller things that we need to do, but this will be kind of the last major benchmark, and then we'll start looking towards moving on to the system. So I'm very happy about it, if you can't tell. Kind of talked already about that. We anticipate closing out the contract in June of this year, should we not encounter any type of nuances within the system. And the last thing that I want to report, which is not in here, is as far as our fiscal year 2018 budget, our expenditures are all done. We still have revenue coming in, and we will still continue to have revenue coming in until probably February, March, or April. That will need to be brought back by the finance department. But obviously, we are all done making expenditures, and it looks like our expenses are about 99.5%, which is very good. I don't think I'd like to get it much closer than that. Obviously, there'll be some slight changes in that as finance changes some things, but I'm very happy with that we stayed within our budgetary requirements, and we appreciate the Board of Commissioners' support in both the financial end from the budgetary aspect and the obviously application and approval of equipment and vehicles and things of that nature. And as far as the radio project goes, this has been a great road. I'm like a proud father. I'm glad to see it come online, and hopefully we'll have a good system to use by early spring here, and we can start to wrap up the legacy system.
Commissioners, any questions of the undersheriff? Bill?
I'd like to thank you for your work you've been doing on the 800 system. I heard nothing but good about it. I know you've spent a lot of time, and I'd like to just thank you for that. A lot of first responders will be doing their work more comfortably knowing they can actually get a hold of dispatch when they need to. So, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity.
Darius?
Yeah, just 2 quick questions. How many of the scenario trainings do you do?
As far as active shooter training?
Yeah.
So we conduct those on a need basis. We wait for individuals to contact us to say they want that type of training. The schools have a certain requirement, and of course the courthouse had a certain requirement. We actually just did the active shooter training at the health department back in the first or second week of January.
Yeah.
First week of January, and again, these are all in conjunction with the 911 department because that's obviously a critical aspect. So this past year, I believe that we have executed 11 of those once you include all the school districts and the private businesses that ask for it. We don't always do the full-scale deployment with firing blanks so they can hear the noise and those type of things, because sometimes businesses just want a soft approach about what would we do if an assailant came in here, where would we go, what would be the avenues of escape. So we kind of look at their facility as far as OEM does, and they kind of grade that as far as, well, maybe you should go here, or maybe you might want to think about this upgrade to your building and things like that. But in all, we've done about 11 or 12 of those total trainings for schools, businesses, and of course, county departments.
Okay. And then, my last question would be, do you do any scenario trainings with churches, restaurants, things are more on the smaller scale?
We actually did do 2 trainings this year with churches, and that was more of a consultation where they wanted us to just kind of look at the facility, receive some soft training or instruction about what they would do if they had an individual come in there, because you're right, that is a very unfortunately, a large growing segment where you have assailants coming into houses of worship, causing harm and things like that. So there was, about a year and a half ago, kind of a local pastoral meeting of a number of faiths and churches that came together. We came and spoke to them and just kind of offered input. Maybe it was longer ago than that. And that was just really kind of a soft rollout about what you would do if we had a clergy or a church or even a number of congregations that came together. We'd be happy to offer that training. We just have to time it out because the school liaison deputies are the ones that do it, and we don't want to take them out of their work sites.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions? If not, Undersheriff, thank you.
Thank you.
Takes us to the prosecutor semi-annual report. Jerry Jarzinka.
To advance it, just click left. This one right there. Great, thank you so much. Thanks. We do have a PowerPoint presentation for our semi-annual report. I believe it's been downloaded to board docs for review. The first slide basically looks at our warrants and petitions reviewed last year in total. You can see the comparison from 2015 to 2018. Last year, we're a little bit down on total warrant requests reviewed, 4611 versus 5368 and then 6,000. Authorized, we're about 3,100 warrants are authorized last year as well. And also reviewed 536 juvenile petitions. And just for the benefit of juvenile petitions, basically they are criminal warrant requests, but the individual is under age 17. And so that's a different process, but it is a criminal charge, even if you're juvenile. The next slide is really a big project for us here in the prosecutor's office, the LEAP module. Basically, we're paperless in our office, and that includes everything we do with all our criminal cases, including cases that are reviewed, for warrants or juvenile petitions. And last fall, this board basically approved in the IT budget money to upgrade basically our IT on these how these cases are reviewed by LEAP. Basically, it's going to decrease data entry because when the information comes into the system from secure portals from different police agencies in the county directly to our office, those warrant requests will come via that secure portal. It'll go into the paperless system. It's going to be less time scanning documents into the computer files, and so expect that we're going to be able to review warrants and petitions faster, 1 week or less. In addition to that, notice too, as far as subpoena submissions, the officers will be able to look at those in their patrol cars as we issue them electronically from our office, so it should have the option to be more efficient. In addition to that, one thing not noticed on this slide is that a real benefit is when, let's say, an officer submits a warrant request, we issue a charge, let's say, for felonious assault. Let's say 2 or 3 weeks later, that same officer does what's known as an additional police report, a supplemental police report. What will happen is that the officer will submit it in this secure portal. It'll come to our office, and this program will then identify this supplemental report, and then it will file it in the proper file that's been charged already. And we'll also get an email from that officer notifying that the supplemental report has come in. And that's a big thing because right now, if you look at, we issue, over 3,000 warrants were issued last year, plus juvenile petitions that were issued. You imagine how many reports are associated with each one of those different charges. If an officer does a supplemental report, the current system, they put it into what they call Aegis, and we may or may not know that they've done the supplemental report. We don't have the additional information. And why that's critical is that, as a prosecutor, we've got the burden to give to the defense or disclose to them any evidence that we have, which includes, of course, all police reports. So when you come to trial, you want to have confidence that you've given to the defense everything that you have. And so basically with this LEAP system, I believe that that's going to be satisfied. We're not going to have issues with that. The timeline to install the LEAP module into our current paperless system, if you look at that slide, so tomorrow, basically the vendor ImageSoft is going to come to our office. They're going to do a field study, and then the next timeline is that for March 18th to May 24th, they're going to be building, demo testing the model for this LEAP module, which is basically, the warrant review process. End user training is going to be June 3rd to the 7th. Acceptance testing June 10th to the 28th, and the goal is to go live with the system on July 8th. The end user training, basically part of the LEAP project, is that officers from each of our police agencies are going to be part of a training unit, as well as my office. That's going to be videotaped. They're going to be trained, and the trainers then go out and train their staffs, their agencies. So the goal is to go live by July 8th. It's basically about a 12-week program of installation and training. So we're excited by that. Going over some of the cases from last year, 2018, obviously major cases were Anthony Jalea and Tracy Lawrence, two murder trials. Anthony Jalea, the social media or Facebook murder case that we tried and convicted last year. He's got first-degree felony murder, which is a life sentence without parole. Tracy Lawrence was convicted. He was charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder and felony firearm. He was convicted as charged. That was last summer. As you know, that was quite a controversial case in the sense of how far can you go if you're a property owner defending your property. Obviously, if someone's just trespassing and they're unarmed, that is not a proper use of deadly force. Also note the other cases on there as well, but the Jalea and Lawrence were the 2 major cases we had last year. Looking at the trial dockets here for the coming next 4 months, I would just note it's not listed, but we just had a major murder trial. Daisha Cooper, that went to trial in January, was convicted of involuntary manslaughter, the homicide of Ben Johnson. As you note, that was a retrial case, very difficult case. There was an element of domestic violence as part of that case, but that resolved in the second trial. And the upcoming cases, Troy Calhoun is a murder case. Andrew Fraunfelker, former city councilman, that's a high-profile case really involving domestic violence. That's assault with intent to do great bodily harm. In addition, Jared Ballard is also another homicide case that occurred near the Queens area. Victims' rights. Our victims' rights unit, of course, is very busy. It's part of our state constitution. There's also the Victims' Rights Crime Act. We have obligations under the Victims' Right Crime Act, basically to notify victims of felony cases and certain misdemeanors as to the status of their cases. We have a unit on our floor, on the 3rd floor of the courthouse. They actively work with victims and witnesses who come to court for various cases, not only trials, but different hearings, and also to answer questions. You can see letters generated to victims of crime was over 5,700. We had over 2,200 people assist face-to-face. Also applications to the Crime Victims Compensation Board for funeral medical bills. as well as attending numerous pretrials, motions, parole board hearings, Court of Appeals, jury trials, commutation hearings, and also whenever there's a sentence for a felony sentencing in circuit court, we do offer victims the opportunity, if they want to make a statement, a victim impact statement, to be with them or to assist them or perhaps to read that statement for them on those cases. The family division, this is kind of an unknown, really a little known division of our court or our office. Basically, the family division is in a satellite office over on Lansing Avenue with the friend of the court and the health department, that section. They basically deal with child support and paternity issues. They're busy. Their stats from 2018, they had 817 appointments with custodial and non-custodial parents, 21 hearings, 512 orders addressing those issues of support and paternity. Community impact, we continue to be active reaching out to the community in different forums. We, in general, I meet with citizens once a month for coffee at the Roxy Cafe or by appointment in my office or at the Roxy Cafe. If they have any questions about the legal system, especially our criminal justice system, our office. Serve at a number of boards listed on there. Very proud of the efforts that we've made in the issue of heroin and opioids. It's pretty exciting to see what's going on in that area. Also involved with the Prosecutors Association, or PAAM, and different committees as well. In addition, I know the undersheriff touched upon a little task force to help out the city with shootings in the city. The community impact of the violent offenders, we meet once a month with a detective from the City of Jackson Police Department. Myself and 4 of my assistants meet with them. We basically look at individuals in the city who've been involved with shooting. Typically that focuses on members who are really 3 groups or gangs, and as cases get charged, we follow those cases closely. We don't make any deals with them. We try to address bond issues and set bond conditions to try to limit their contact and to put some pressure on those members to try to refrain from engaging in violent activities such as shootings. So last summer we actually upped that meeting to twice a month for the summer months, and expect we're going to do the same here in 2019 as well. Seen success with that effort. Also, community impact. Last November 30th we had our 5th drug summit at Jackson College. It was a highly successful event. We had over 300 people attend. It's the most we've ever had. It went really, really well. Very, very happy with how that went. For this year, we've got 4 quarterly meetings of the task force on heroin and prescription drug abuse. The first quarterly meeting is going to be this week on February 14th at the Tower Building on the 17th floor. Starting at 1 o'clock. It's open to the public. If you wish to attend, just let our office know. And just this last slide, just an overview of all the different court responsibilities we have to basically satisfy as part of our office during the course of a year, whether it's a felony, a misdemeanor, whether it's a juvenile petition, whether it's abuse and neglect of kids in circuit court, child support paternity, whether it's mental health petitions with the hospital, forfeitures, victims' rights, child support. And so that would be my last slide for the year, for this end of last year. Any questions by the committee?
Commissioners, any questions for the prosecutor? Go ahead, Daniel.
Good morning. How you doing today?
Good morning, Commissioner Mahoney.
Good. I just had a really quick question for you. There was some discussion had at our last meeting around the idea of a needle exchange program, and I just wanted to get your opinion on how you would feel about something like that in the county.
Well, that's a good question. That's a pretty controversial question. I think there's 2 schools of thought that I know of. One school of thought is if you go with that type of program, that you're encouraging more drug use. And I know that as far as our task force on heroin and prescription drug abuse, we've got 6 work groups. One of those is the medical work group. And I know a couple of doctors who are involved with that indicate to me that the studies nationwide indicate that that type of program, they also call it a harm reduction program, has been beneficial in overall health of the community, such as lowering things like hepatitis, infections. And so the way I look at it is that I certainly don't want to encourage drug use, but on the other hand, when we've got an opioid epidemic where I think the stats from 2017 is that we lost 70,000 people from drug deaths. The United States was, I think, equates to about 200 people a day dying. That's like a passenger airliner crashing every single day of the year. So, you know, even though I don't like to encourage drug use, I'm at the point now, I'm open to options to try whatever might work. Certainly it would have to be regulated. So that'd be my answer to that.
Thank you, Jerry. Any other questions for Jerry? Hearing none, I think we're set. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we have the 911 quarterly report with Director Jason Hammond.
Good morning. Before you, I kind of put together a kind of a year-end report, as I don't have a lot of stats and stuff from just a quarter. So the first part of it talks about how many calls 911 Center takes a year. We take about 206,000 calls every year. This is on our 911 trunks. Down below you'll see the little graph. The graph shows that we're getting more and more wireless calls. Then wireline. Wireline is your old analog copper line phones into the house and businesses. And then VoIP are steadily going up every year as well. Below that you got the Central Dispatch answers a total of 17,222 on average a month, which takes down about 566 a day of calls. This does not include our admin lines. Admin lines, we got 8 of them are in dispatch. Admin lines are used by JCA, alarm companies, officers, chiefs, and other businesses as well. We've seen an increase in calls, about 4% from last year, which was about 196,000. Every year, dispatch is required by state to do year-ending paperwork. Comes out right now, actually. I submitted about May 15th. It gives all the calls broke down into different categories, incidents as well, as far as the revenue as well too. So all that's on the state website for every state. For every county. We've dispatched about 139,000 calls last year. On the next page, you'll see a list of all the different agencies we use for mutual aid. There's been an increase in different agencies outside of Jackson County. That comes with MAVIS. The agencies outlying Jackson County, they'll use other counties to come in to help assist them for mutual aid. Trainings, I just completed the SNC State 911 Committee paperwork last month, which I have to submit in December for allocation of 2019 funds for trainings. Every year we get about an average of 19,000. It's broke down per full-time employee for any county that participates in this program. These funds can only be used through the state. These funds can only be used for the dispatch center for trainings only. Back pay, training costs, travel. Right now the technicians in Jackson County either exceed or right in line with the state trainings every year. I got a list of different classes that I sent them to last year. The conferences they've gone to, those are mainly just for dispatchers. It will discuss customer service, which I know are working on throughout the year, last year and this year. Different liability concerns that affects the center as well, and texting, which is coming soon. Different exercises that we participate throughout the county. I know the undersheriff talked about it a little bit. We did do 2 exercises with DTMB, which is the state building downtown. We'll also participate in Safetyville with the Human Service Department and the Boy and Girl Scouts. We have them, we go to their schools and do presentations for them, and they also come to the center. We also do presentations there for them. Update on the different projects that are going on in Jackson County as far as dispatch. PFN fiber network, we're hoping to start conversions this week. We got kind of delayed because of AT&T misplaced a couple equipment within the center when they were off in early January. So delayed for about a month, but moved ahead. Both the primary site and the secondary site both have a primary fiber coming in and a secondary fiber coming in. So if one does fail, there's another one in there to take over. So there's no drop calls. The new MSAG database is completed finally. MSAG is a master street address guide. It's a database only for dispatch. It controls all the Annie and Alley information that dispatch gets. It has to be maintained daily. We're switching over from AT&T's old site to the new site. New database, we had to convert everything, which took probably about 6-7 months to do. So it's very labor intensive. Just so you guys know, we have a total of 56 telco companies in Jackson County that we use. All 56 have to be converted over to the new system. So about one a day. AT&T texting. All the infrastructure hardware is in place. Yeah. 56.
You have 55 competitors?
Here's a list that I have to submit, okay? I didn't know we had that many until I had to provide the document for the PFN. Okay, so the system of texting, all the hardware and stuff is in place. There's no time frame of how long the testing will take on our end. It could be 2-3 months, but we are looking forward to it. We need to think about a campaign strategy once texting does come up at the center, how we're going to promote it to the local citizens. The rest of the state and the county kind of use call if you can, text if you can't. More to come on that, but hopefully by spring, summer, we'll have texting working. We are, from the 911 Advisory Board, we are currently discussing the issues of staffing and EMD, emergency medical dispatching, that I know has been brought up a few times. There was a subcommittee at the last meeting that was put together, so we're looking into it. Tyler Technology, we are moving forward with this project, and we got supported last year. Hopefully have it completed within 12 months, but earlier if we can. This kind of will move our center to the forefront of technology in Michigan with NG 911. So hopefully we'll be leading. And that's all I have.
Commissioners, any questions of Director Hammond? Daniel, is that you? Okay.
Good morning, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm fantastic. Just a couple of questions. So on those VoIP calls, which I know those are probably going to start increasing. I see it's only like 6% of the total amount, or almost 7% of the total amount of calls you guys receive right now are coming from VoIP systems. Are you guys having any issues with locating where those calls are coming from, being that they're VoIP calls, or is there a process they have to register when they sign up for that VoIP system to make sure that their physical address is located?
So when they do the VoIP phone, as long as whoever they're going with takes their information and puts it into the database, which is the MSAC database. That telco company does that. Then they send an email to me verifying it. As long as they do that, it'll be in the system. The problem is a lot of these little companies are not doing that, and we're missing a lot, which when dispatch gets it and sees it, they let me know, and then I call the company up. I talk to their MSAC database coordinator. We try to work through it. Unfortunately, sometimes it's not a quick fix. It's a couple days, a couple weeks sometimes.
Okay. And then the other thing I was gonna say, that's good information also. So I work in wireless, so that's
Okay.
that's good information. The second thing I was gonna ask about is, or really kind of just make a comment on, I think it's a great thing that you guys are moving to allow our constituents to be able to contact via text. I know one big place that most people hang out at who would be in that market to text versus make a phone call would be on social media, and there's a lot of really savvy campaigns that they put together like that just literally show like a text story unfolded, and that might be a good way to market that you can text 911 in our county at that point. Just kind of showing the unfolding of a storyline of someone actually calling in for help might be a good idea. And then the last thing, you may not be even aware of it, and it's just a general question. I just kind of wanted your opinion and feedback on there's like a 911 scanner page in Jackson, and I'm
Yep.
sure you probably get a lot of calls about things that are said on there. I just
Yeah.
kind of wanted your feedback on that, and then thoughts on if the 911 center has thought about putting something like that together so it can actually be official information, not make-believe.
So if you didn't hear about last Friday, one of the radio apps that one of the users uses on that system, he did a couple upgrades, and his house was live, had an open mic for about 12 hours, so the whole radio community heard exactly what was going on in his house for 12 hours. Of course, he apologized after dispatch had to actually pull the app up and listen to it to find out who it was. Dispatch then called them and let him know that his conversations with his wife and kids were all live, and everybody could hear it on the radio app. Wasn't on our radio system, thank God, but it was on that. So some information I think is good to put out there. Some of the information I think needs to stay away for a little bit. I know we've had people call us, upset at us for saying that they thought we were the ones posting it, but unfortunately we wasn't. It was a citizen. So I see some good things that can happen if we open our own, but I want to try to get some other things accomplished first, and then I know we separate our websites now on the county website under 911 dispatch, so we're working on that, trying to get that updated and changed with IT, so some new things coming.
Jason, thank you. I think we're set.
Okay, thank you.
I'm curious.
Okay?
I don't quite understand this person has a mic? I mean, what am I missing here? I don't.
So he controls a radio app for listening to Jackson County, and somehow when he installed some new devices, that radio app opened up in his house, and he didn't realize it, that pretty much his house became an open mic only through the radio app that he runs.
Like it's like doing a live feed on the internet, same thing, only using the radio app, and it had audio from his house.
So this is some guy who monitors 911 and then what? Types it into
the Facebook page.
Wow. Okay.
Does it daily.
And so his mic was on, so everybody it was typing what he was saying?
Listen to his voice.
They just heard his voice straight up. Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
The conversation between him and his wife and kids, the whole community heard.
Yeah, I don't know that we want to associate with that kind of app.
You don't have any choice. We're not.
Okay.
No. No.
Okay.
He didn't set it up.
Jason, again, thank you for the
Welcome, thank you.
lengthy report. JC.Coldpatch, Probably a good thing they have you at the end of the meeting, Chris, because it's a long meeting.
Yeah, it's a knife that cuts both ways, right? All right. Cold patch, we have our bids in front of us. One comment. We're pleased with the bids. There may have been an expectation that we would be spending far less, but I just want to emphasize that cold patches are our emergency patch material that we use. And this quantity actually, given the weather we're having and the condition of our roads, would be much, much higher if we had not purchased our recycler that we do make hot mix. So this is supplementary material, weekend patching, evening patching, using our new Python. We need a material that we can use at times like this. So any questions?
Commissioners, any questions on the cold patch proposal? And if not, we're looking for a motion to send it on to the full board.
Support.
Motion and support. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the same. Motion carried. Thank you. Chris, Green Road temporary road closure.
Thank you. Our agreement is in order and has been vetted. You heard about this at the study session for discussion and reflection and so forth. I guess we're here to take any questions. We have representatives from Ag Industries here. And as far as we know, the residents are fairly satisfied with the outcome in speaking with their representatives.
So Chris, just the highlights of it, in conjunction with the road closure, they're going to pave the entrance to that subdivision. They're going to install a gate that has probably a Knox box on it for emergency personnel. It won't impact the Beauty Road designation, you believe anyway.
Correct.
And it'll be restored at a new grade when they're all done.
Correct.
Okay. Commissioners, any questions? And if not, we're looking for a motion to send this on to the full board. Yes.
Support.
Okay, motion and support. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, the same. Motion carried. Asphalt cement tanks, change order and foundation. Chris.
Thank you. Following the award, which we appreciate last month for the tanks, we had some detailed discussions with the manufacturer. So there's good news and bad news. The good news is we removed $20,000 in features that, after further reviewing, we don't need, such as radar sensors and what they call dunnage beams that are the foundation for the tank. So $20,000 came off of the original $514,000 figure. But then we reviewed the delivery to truck these from Wisconsin from the plant. Each tank, the total for both is $19,400, so that comes back into the picture. And then there were 3 features that we wanted to add after we learned more. The key feature that we wanted to add was a redundant heating system. We had considered early on having 2 gas heaters in case one breaks down, but we realized that the smarter move would be to put in electric heating elements, and that needed to be decided right now as the tanks begin their manufacturing cycle so that they can line the inside of the tanks with the coils that are necessary. So in this way, in case there's ever a gas issue or supply issue or a problem with the heater, any kind of problems, we can still run and operate and keep our oil hot using the electric elements. Electric is more expensive and less efficient overall, less cost effective, so it would not be our desired or primary heating. But we definitely will benefit from having the redundancy. In addition to those change order items, we're seeking authority from you for up to $100,000 for concrete foundation, gas supply line work, and electrical work. We were hoping to have firm quotes and bids at this time, but with your blessing, we'd like to keep moving and report back next month as to what those proposals came in at. We're fairly confident we'll be under that mark, but there is a risk we could be higher depending on individual circumstances and so forth.
Chris, I have some concerns with the installation of the electric heaters. I guess that would be only for if the gas system fails, is what the purpose of that is. And do we have any idea how frequently that happens in the industry?
Not often. The gas heaters are fairly reliable, but when you're living and dying by it, we ran into snags this year when we couldn't get oil or when it couldn't be. There were literally days it just wasn't hot enough yet. So there could be times, maybe the shipments come in late when we want to really double heat potentially, so that is an added benefit. to make sure we're at our 360 degrees or so that we need when we load the tankers. The tankers are cold in the morning, so you need a little extra boost for that first load especially. So we feel that it's a small factor, but could have huge consequences in the future.
Was our plan not to also have backup cement oil available by trucking if necessary, and also through Michigan Paving if they were so inclined?
We could. Right now, all indicators, in my opinion, looking at the crystal ball in the industry, is everybody is busy, and scheduling is so critical right now that an emergency call to get oil is going to put us at the back of the line generally. So it is the plan, though, if things smooth out in scheduling. So we're seeing it now with our bids. Contractors are extremely busy and so forth. So it is the plan. But we think this is still a smart move even with that.
Commissioners, did you have any? Tony?
You're looking for electrical backup in case your
Tony, can you use your mic there, please, if you're not?
Closer to it?
Yeah.
You're looking to add an electrical backup heater in case your gas service fails?
Any combination of factors could happen. Gas service is not likely to fail, but you never know if a line gets hit and or outage, can occur. The heater itself may malfunction. The pumps could malfunction. Could be, a few days before we can get parts shipped in. You never know. It certainly probably is not likely in the first few years of life, but later on, 5-10 years down the road, we will take very good care of the gas heater. But even there, we want to make sure that we can, two things. Cover ourselves when it happens so that we can stay productive. Because when you've mobilized and you're ready to go and you find out the gas heater didn't run or isn't running, you've got to collapse everything and you've just wasted, potentially $10,000 to $20,000 mobilizing and then having to just halt everything. So the other key that I'm trying to explain here is that boosting the heat if necessary in order to get the temperature up faster at key times. Perhaps the weather's cooler, maybe the shipments came late, because they're only coming in at about 300 degrees from the wholesaler, and we have to boost it up to about 360 to 370.
Okay.
We just think it's prudent, good, best practices, bottom line.
As a backup, you want the electrical. Do you have, electricity fails as well as gas service fails. Do you have a backup generator on your facility?
We do, yes.
And it's capable of handling this additional electric load?
We don't know that for sure, but if that's happened, where we don't have power either, we may not be working. That'd be a big deal. Right, correct. We'll probably be, if that's the case, and there's likely a windstorm or some flooding or something, we'll probably be out in emergency response mode for the community. That's a good question.
I looked at the board approved the purchase of these tanks January 15. January 16, JDOT received a proposal for additional services and options.
Correct.
The day after our board meeting?
Correct.
You didn't know about this on the 15th?
We had our conference call with them immediately in the morning.
You had your what?
We had our conference call with them immediately in the morning on the 16th, and so they were very responsive after we vetted all these details and talked through things. We were on the phone with them 3 times. They were doing homework, we were doing homework, and we got the additional information and got the revised proposal at the end of the day. They were very responsive for us.
Okay. The concrete, I know I personally asked a question about the concrete, particularly with the secondary containment walls. And the answer that I recollect getting was that the concrete was included and that the secondary containment walls would be there as part of this package. I'm surprised now that the concrete wasn't included. And I go to the service agreement summary dated January 16, item 3, all concrete and foundations these are the service agreement responsibilities of Jackson County Department of Transportation. Item number 3, all concrete and foundations to include truck scales. The service agreement, we hadn't seen that before the 15th?
We knew that we needed to provide the concrete. We don't need scales, though. That's more for private sector applications, because we have access to scales already, so.
So now you're saying you did know you needed to provide the concrete?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry if there was a misunderstanding.
You didn't tell us that on the 15th.
I certainly didn't omit it on purpose. We knew we needed a gas line, we knew we needed concrete, and we knew we needed electric. In addition, we just had to get the manufacturing of the tanks moving. I'd have to review notes, and if I misspoke, I do sincerely apologize.
Okay, so in the service agreement summary dated January 16th, responsible to Jackson County Department of Transportation, all concrete and foundations to include truck scales. So they're putting it right in here in their responsibilities for us, the requirement for truck scales. How when a truck rolls in and unloads material, how do they and us determine the quantity of material that was delivered?
Well, we have measurement.
After weight on these scales?
We have readings in the tank, and there's a SCADA system.
You have what on the tank? I didn't
We
know.
have reading system in the tank, pressure transducers that will know the exact volume of material put in the tank. So our SCADA system, there's a computer-controlled system that will know the level in the tank before tanker dumps in and after, and that will be recorded and verified as part of our invoicing process. And
Okay, then I need you to check into this because the current responsibility of Jackson County Transportation is to provide truck scales.
correct, and we have access
Correct?
to scales. Yes, we can, if we have a trust issue with our vendor, we can check that. But our pressure transducers in the tank will measure the volume of material offloaded, much like a fuel gauge, essentially.
Okay, if you have a scale at your facility that they can use, why are they putting to include truck scales in their list of obligations for us?
I can only think it's boilerplate language. They're just trying to cover themselves. It's not relevant for us.
All right. Are there building fees that will be added to this project also?
No extra building fees, no.
No building permits, no inspection fees?
We are coordinating with Blackman Township on the permits necessary for this, but no, there's no other fees.
Okay, in the proposal, item number 15, or item 5, it said that their proposal included FOB, freight to Jackson. And now they're coming back and saying freight wasn't included? When I
The
read
change
the
order
earlier
proposal? The
when I read
revised proposal? The revised proposal would say FOB, yes, because we asked them to include it with the changes made.
Commissioners, if I can just point out one thing, we started this month at the urging of the administrator providing copies of the board documents a day earlier. We typically get them on Thursday now, and glad to see the scrutinizing of all the documents, but Chris is also available to take calls on specifics of issues like this.
Absolutely.
I would assume anytime.
Yeah.
And if you see something that you have specific questions on, certainly these are all legitimate questions, feel free to call Chris a call.
Yeah.
And I think we all have his phone number, so.
Yeah. Well, I was reviewing these last night. I had obligations to my family Friday and Saturday, so it was Sunday night. I was up till 2. I got up at 4 to feed the animals and get a shower and get here. So I was up and got 2 hours of sleep before I came here.
I don't think Chris wants a call at 4 in the morning, but.
Well, I can take one.
I don't think Chris wants a call at 4 in the morning, but I'm not speaking.
I was wondering what you were telling me there. Startup services. The proposal says that startup services are extra. That's on page 9. Will you need them to provide startup services?
We've been given verbal assurances that they'll be here for the training and the overview. They could be thinking that beyond what we've verbally discussed, but I can follow up on that.
Does anybody have that proposal open on their, can you go to page 9 and look what it says for the startup services?
Tony, which document are you on the change order installation quote?
That was on the,
It's not the foundation design.
no, asphalt spending, asphalt memory tax.
And if I might be so bold as to suggest that if we do decide to send this on to the full board, Chris can certainly get back with the committee with the answers to these questions before next Tuesday.
Most
Is that a
certainly.
fair statement?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay, so why don't we move forward with that as a game plan? Commissioners can vote how they choose, and Tony, if you feel a need to document the questions anymore, you can shoot them directly, I think, to Chris, or Mike, do you want him to come to you, or?
You should CC me when he contacts us.
I'm sorry, say what? CC Mike,
I
okay.
prefer.
Yep.
Yeah.
If there's any additional, and Chris or his staff will get back with all the committee members on the answers to Tony's questions.
One, all right, well, this could come either place, but ESGI, who's providing the site installation, is non-union. Are you going to have any problem with your union employees?
Not generally, no, because frankly, they're not qualified to do this kind of work, so there'd be no battle of work. Anything we can do in-house, we generally do, to give our employees diversity in tasks and duties and to learn. But this is more of a rocket science operation. We need specialists. So ESGI is a very specialized contractor with tank installations, and we want to make sure the warranty isn't voided or compromised.
Rodney, did you have a question?
I did. I was wondering what the KW would be of the electric. Would you be using natural gas or propane? And what the BTU's characteristic of those two fuels would be?
We're using natural gas, not propane. So we're running the line from our main supply line. That's part of the $100,000 authorization we're seeking today, is to get that line installed. That's been vetted and verified with consumers. We have adequate pressure, we have adequate capacity. It's a 2 million BTU heater, very powerful. We're not even sure we need that full power most of the time, but generally we're heating one tank at a time. I don't know the KW on the electric system, but I can get that to you.
Okay, if there's no additional questions, we'd be looking for a motion. I will say that I'm a little apprehensive myself about the backup electric, but I'll support sending the full proposal to the board, and we can hash it out there, but,
Support.
okay, motion and support. Additional comments or thoughts?
Just a very quick comment. I had the chance to, look over everything over the weekend, and then kind of went backwards and looked at some of the things that your department has done in the past, and I just wanted to thank you for your work that you've contributed to Jackson County. You're certainly an asset, and I just really appreciate your forward thinking on the what ifs. I kind of noticed a lot of the reports that I looked at. You kind of looked at again some of the what ifs, and I really appreciate that, and just wanted to say thank you.
Great, thank you, and that's actually one reason we're doing the redundant heating. Murphy's Law happens, and I know it's a little confusing that we had the approval last month. We're just being honest and transparent, and as we find things, we feel a duty to disclose and bring this information to you. We have certainly change order authority to do some of these items, but we wanted to bring it to you as a full package, just so you're fully aware of what's happening.
Thank you.
I'll also reiterate that when we talked about this last time and approved what we did, we were talking about the timeline of making sure that we had the system up and operating when we're ready to start working on the roads, and that was one of the problems with the other suppliers. They couldn't do it in time, and this one could.
Correct.
So.
And they were less expensive. The one we chose was.
I understood the urgency of it for that reason, but there's nothing wrong with crossing the Ts and dotting the Is.
Correct. I do have an answer to Rodney's question, if I may.
Go ahead.
The electric heating is rated at 60 kilowatts and consists of 14 heating elements, enclosed end pipes projecting 9 feet into the tank. 100% efficient. 460 volt three-phase power with 120 volt single-phase control voltage transformer. So,
Okay, there's a motion on the floor and a support. If there's no additional questions or comments, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the same.
Aye.
Okay, one opposition. Motion to send it to the full board passes. Amended Jack's 20 through 2023 tip project list.
we're bringing this amendment to you today because of the McDivitt project award, and the bottom line is that you see McDivitt removed in 2022, 2023, and substituted in, you see South Street and Bagley Road. So these roads will have recycled base and new asphalt as part of their proposed construction. And we basically negotiated with other members, namely the city of Jackson, on how to reuse those funds. They got a portion of the funds, I think about $500,000, and we retained these two projects after negotiating that.
Okay, so we need a motion to send the tip amendments to the full board. Motion and support. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the same. Motion carried. Chris, the McDivitt Road Survey.
Thank you. Basically, we're seeking ratification. We use the provision in our purchasing policy that allows us to use an MDOT pre-qualified contractor and then notify the board. So we're seeking formal ratification of our decision to award to Spicer Group. They've begun the work. They're probably about 50% complete. We expect this to keep the project moving on our desired time frame.
Okay, Chris, this is a $30,000 award, so it happens here if there's such an inclination. Commissioners, any questions of Chris first on this? And if not, then a motion's in order. Motion and support. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the same. Motion carried. Chris, Robbins Road Bridge.
Thank you. This is a good news item. This was originally put in for a grant, so I guess there is good news and bad news. The bad news is we did not get a grant to replace the bridge to the tune, or rehab it to the tune of maybe $500,000. The good news is we took a much deeper, harder look at the bridge, realized the abutments could be salvaged and used, and that we could purchase a timber deck for about the price you see here, which includes guardrails and installation oversight from our vendor. So this is a fully meets all specs for what they call HL93 modified loading, and we expect at least a 50-year design life out of this project. Our crews plan to install the bridge. We have done other timber box culverts and bridges in the county, and so we're kind of excited for that reason as well. But for a very cost-effective price tag, we'll get this road reopened as soon as possible. And it can be overlaid in the future should Robbins Road be improved from gravel to an asphalt road someday in the future.
So, Chris, I just requested from Mike, our cap here is 75, and the amount you're asking for is 67,702.55, so it happens here at committee.
Correct.
But this is a direct quote from the Timber Bridge, Kren Timber Bridge Incorporated versus soliciting bids.
This is a sole source. The timber bridge industry is heavily consolidated. We did contact two other vendors. What did we learn? One couldn't do it, I believe.
Milbacher couldn't do it, and Wheeler is partnered with them.
So Milbacher couldn't do it, and then Wheeler, the other vendor we're aware of, is Kren Bridge, one and the same, and this is his territory essentially. So we did our best to get a hold of three vendors.
Yeah, and that's fine. I trust you in that regard, but it would be good to put that backup information in there. Saves the questions for later, probably, if there's ever a next time. But
That's a great point.
Is this 67,000 is just materials?
It's materials, it's the guardrails included, which is probably 10 grand of this, the necessary guardrails to the bridge, which meet full standards as well. And it does include the delivery. So back to the point of, we do try to watch those things. And then installation oversight. So it's not a crew coming in and installing it. and we're hands-off. This is an example back to the question we had earlier about our union crews and so forth. Again, we work with them closely to give them projects that they're capable of and enjoy doing.
Bridge funding somewhat different than road funding, I guess. We learned that from Moon Lake Road Bridge.
Correct, that's
So do we-
the grant.
Do we have to supply 30% of that? Is that our in-kind, our labor?
For this one does not have a grant, so it's all on us. It's all our funding, and it is a local road. Because it's more of a rehab or refurbishment of an existing bridge, and we don't need to do the abutments and so forth, we researched our policy. Our local road policy does not require the match. It does for culverts, but it doesn't, it's silent on bridges, actually, because usually we do get grants.
Nice job.
So with your blessing, we were planning to cover this cost and
Nice
just
job.
get this road open.
Thank you.
Sure.
Rodney?
What's the loading capacity of this bridge?
It's everything you can put on it. It's called the HL 93, modified loading, which is the heavy duty, the full structure.
So they can run a farm vehicle across it at 80,000 pounds and it's not going to matter?
Correct. Everything, yeah. It's basically interstate standards, almost, for one lane, 2 lanes actually, I'm sorry. So all the weight of those types of vehicles, even 2 at a time.
Okay, I don't believe we have a motion yet. Okay. Is there support? Support. Tony, did you have a question after that?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
If this proposal is for materials and delivery, who is doing the installation?
We are. Our crews will do the installation. The JCDOT Road Workers Association, our employees. Our employees will.
Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the same. Motion carried. Chris, Commissioner Duckham is telling me I've got 13 minutes left. That means that's what you have for your monthly report.
Well, you see before you the monthly report, and I have just 2 comments, maybe even just 1. First of all, gravel roads are a problem for us, and I just want you to know we're doing our best, but winter maintenance on gravel roads is a problem throughout the Midwest, and you basically, when the ground is frozen, you can't do a lot, and then when it warms up, you basically have a mushy mess, and unless there's very dry weather, there's just not a lot we can do. So we're waiting for those pockets in time when we can take care of those. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions on what you see.
Commissioners, any questions of Chris? Okay. We're
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you. Takes us down to claims. We need to pay the bills. Motion and support. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, the same. Motion carried. Takes us to other minutes, and the March reporting schedule posted takes us back to public comments. Public, you have 2 minutes to address the board. Bradley, you're awful quiet over there. Okay. No public comments. Committee member comments. Hearing none, we're adjourned.